Now, not having your CFO right now, so what does that mean in the interim in terms of, who's replacing him, how are decisions being made in his or her absence?
It's a good question. So there's a guy from San Diego actually named Clay Tellers who's a principal at ECG that's going to be filling the interim role for I think a period of 14 weeks while they do a search for a fill-in guy. But they've given us the playbook. It's a very physician-centric organization, so it's very artistic. It's almost an art where we have to slide things out in front of the physicians to say, hey, this is a tremendous recommendation, and you almost have to trick them into thinking it was their idea to do it in order to get things done here at the University of Louisville Physicians. That's all because of the fact that it is so physician-centric and they don't have a business-minded person at the helm. I guess a brief history lesson is when ULP was when the University of Louisville group got together, they had a business-minded individual who was very rigid, kind of rash for some decisions, and didn't play nice with the physicians. So when that person eventually left, all of the physicians that made up the board, nodded and winked at each other and said, "Let's not have that again." And so they've consistently had a physician at the CEO role. And so, I mean, I'm sure you know this. I mean, anytime you have a physician trying to run a business, it just doesn't go very well. You need a business-minded individual running a business. And so that is the challenge that I'm up against right now. Is but what's nice is both my boss and I have tremendous clout amongst our group. Even though we represent, in terms of gross patient revenue, only about 5 to 10% of the entire group, the leadership that has been brought to the table from my experience in consulting and from Dr. Niemat and his experience as being a neurosurgeon that is about as different as any neurosurgeon you can imagine from an ego perspective. We're both very methodical, very thoughtful in why we're doing things, and we're cognizant of how what we want to do is going to impact the entire organization. Cognizant of the fact that maybe, the approach for a rev cycle solution is different based on subspecialty and, surgery. All of this, right? And so it's a fun environment right now. It's dynamic, and and I think it's really going to be good. I've got a good relationship with this guy Clay, who's going to be in the CFO role for 14 weeks, and so I'm sure if when I present him a short list of vendors, he'll be able to slide that right in front of Dr. Rabelais, who's the current CEO, and take it to the officers and the VPs and the board and say, here's the vendors to pick from. So I think I think it's a really good opportunity.
So ECG's role was to actually spot what's wrong and give recommendations. Your role is to find the vendors that can fulfill their recommendations, bring them back, help vet them, and then boom, you'll start kicking off. Talk to me a little bit about the scope of your role and responsibility there, mate. In terms of, I looked at your title and I read a bit about what Justice wrote, but in your own words, you were describing your role and responsibility. What does that sound like?
Oh man, in my own words, so formally I'm the administrator for the Department of Neurosurgery, which is made up of 3 divisions. The physical medicine, rehab, neurosurgery, and a heavily research. This is almost like a joint venture research collaboration with PM&R and Neurosurge, but it's another division called the Kentucky Spinal Cord Injury Research Center. And so my role, right now in this environment, is to keep us alive and keep us moving forward. Right now our hospital partners are up for sale, right? So the building's for sale, the license to operate is for sale, and an announcement's going to be made in about 6 to 8 weeks in terms of who the final short list is and who the likely buyer is, and then they'll go through further due diligence and do all the paperwork and get everything underwritten. But typically, I'm working with the C-suite of those facilities to churn out business cases and growth plans and business development, meeting with them to make sure that we're meeting quality standards and all of this. But in the absence of that, I've looked at where I can do the most good for my department, and it's really in steering this physician group, right? This University of Louisville physicians group, to make better decisions on the revenue cycle side so that we can make more money. So that, otherwise we're not able to do it.
Is that why your CFO was fired, because your AR days and your bad debt are just out of control?
It maybe, but we never write AR off, right? Because it's a physician-led group, right? They don't get the fact that you cannot collect anything greater than like a year. Like, good luck, And so they've got AR in there that's 5 years old or older. It's unbelievable. You'd come in and look at this place and just shake your head. But yeah, to your point, the metrics are all off. But if you look at the most rudimentary metrics in terms of productivity versus cash in the door, productivity for the past 12 months across all of the organization was flat, up maybe 0.5%. But collections went up 5%. Cash in the door went up 5%. So so we're, just begs the question, why was he gotten rid of? Why did they get rid of him? I just think he wasn't a yes man. He was a rugged New Englander that, would tell you exactly what he thought of the organization. The decision that the CEO was making. A couple times Dr. Abley would ask something about the revenue cycle or something that a CEO should know, right? Basic business function. And instead of, kissing the ring, so to speak, and explaining it to Dr. Abley, Peter started laughing. And I think he just rubbed people the wrong way. He was pretty, he's abrasive. He didn't really play the politicking that you just those are the kind of rules of the game in academic healthcare.
Well, physicians and academics, physicians and academics, a lot of them get to that sort of mode of they've earned some degree of respect. It's like they're missing out on the cash the private sector gives them, so they compensate in cash and sort of status and respect. I think that's part of it. And I think if you don't get that when you go into that environment, then it's a little bit naive. It's like no one wants to do that. But if you're in that environment, you go, you know what? Those are the players. Those are going to be the rules.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's right. That's how you have to get it done, right? And he's not that guy. So
which bit is actually being sold? Your physician practice isn't being sold, is it?
No, it's not being sold. The hospital is actually being sold. Yeah. So the Jewish hospital. I don't know if you've heard about this. So Catholic Health Initiatives invested a gob of money in Kentucky to operate a whole bunch of facilities. So they bought the buildings. They put it all under this new license called Kentucky One. And 5 years ago or more, it was kind of this new idea that was going to come and just resurrect Louisville's healthcare market to the good old days when people would come here for, regional care, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It failed miserably. And it was largely because of the rev cycle. Catholic Health had a minority stake, I think still has a minority stake in Conifer. And the way that they had configured Conifer with the cancer center, with the Jewish hospital, with the with the University of Louisville hospital that they were operating, and in a lot of the hospitals that were in the good part, the good payer mix areas, they all were handicapped by the same nonsensical procedures that they decided to configure within Conifer, and so they suffered tremendously. And posted loss after loss after loss after loss, and finally CHI made the decision that they were going to pull out of the Louisville market. So and it's kind of, I think it's a blend, right? The rev cycle had quite a few issues. But from a leadership perspective, you didn't have the right butts in the right seats. You know, they had this woman who was firing people around her who were smart because they made her look bad. You know, they knew what they were doing. You know, the specialty pharmacy guy, he had a great idea for pain clinics, but she fired him. The other pharmacy guy that knew 340B really well, that was telling her that she needed to take a look at how they were running the cancer centers because they were bleeding money. I mean, if you're 340B eligible and you're not billing right, you are losing a ton of money, right?
Yeah.
And so she fired that guy too. And and then she fired the CEO of ULH. Well, those guys got together and started a 340B company that now is licensing their technology to pharmaceutical companies and to health systems, because it can run a nerdy algorithm and tell exactly what the liability is on either side in terms of how much needs to be reimbursed to the payer and the pharmaceutical company. Based on eligibility criteria. And so, I mean, really smart guys. And she just kind of fired everybody around her that made her look bad. And finally, I think they clued in and got rid of her and announced the sale and liquidation of all the vast majority of the Louisville properties. And they announced it in I think March or April. And so since that time, I've been partnering with Peter, the former CFO, and with Debbie, the AVP, the VP over RevCycle, and then working with some of the other executive directors that have an interest in seeing ULP succeed from a RevCycle perspective, in order to make sure that, hey, we're doing what we can on the front end and on the back end, and
So
really trying to make it a success.
Your role and responsibility right now, my sense of it is, it actually supersedes your traditional scope of role and responsibility. It's almost like you've been given enhanced powers right now, based on all this oil and flux.
It does, yeah. It kind of does. I mean, it's a little bit unsettling, right? Because I go to the dean, who's supposed to have backup plans for all of the faculty. And we got no support. I mean, I was asking about our contingency plans. Like, let's say the VA comes in and buys Jewish Hospital and the Fraser Rehab Institute. I mean, that's 80% of our department's activity occurs at those two facilities. If the VA comes in, where are we going? And I get blank stares. So I'm out, trying to broker deals in medical office space, as contingency backups, working with REITs, just different real estate investment trusts on providing liquidity to build out what we would need built out, and then build it into the rent for 5 to 10 years. I mean, it's incredible. I mean, I'm learning a ton right now, and
I bet.
And it's fun, but it's still a little bit unsettling, right? Because there's so much uncertainty, and things could go very bad very quickly if the wrong buyer comes in and hands us an eviction notice. So
here's two questions I'd have for you then. One would be, as you're looking at the revenue cycle right now, and with in consultation with what ECG have said, are you looking at the revenue cycle fairly and squarely just from the physician practice side, or are you looking at from the physician practice side and elements of the hospital?
Just the pro side, just the professional side right now.
So irrespective of who buys the hospital or what happens, that actually won't derail what you need to do with the physician, with the revenue cycle on the physician practice anyway. So these are...
That's exactly right.
That's exactly right. That's the second question. So the second question was, is the sale going to affect what you're looking at right now? But it's not. So that's the one certainty in all this.
Yep, that's exactly right. Though, I mean, the one certainty is that ULP is going to continue to be ULP, in the, for the time being. They've got debt covenants coming up that I'm fairly certain that they'll be able to meet. But I mean, that's really the one constant, which is I mean, it's kind of tough to hang your hat on it, right? I mean, we've got excellent surgeons. I mean, so I'll take it back. Like, their excellence and their consistency is another constant. But it's tough that the organization that we partner with right now they perform so poorly, and yet that is the constant.
Okay. So nothing you're looking at from a vendor meeting perspective is tied in any way to the hospital. So you're not looking for anything
Correct.
from the hospital.
Yeah.
Just the
No, it would. Yeah, that's right. It would make no sense to do that right now because we don't know who the partner would be.
And if I looked at if I was trying to sort of explain to someone the size of this physician practice, was it nearly 400 physicians?
More than that, yeah.
What would be the gross revenue for the physician practice side of things?
100 million or more.
Okay.
Maybe. Let me look. I'll ask Debbie about it.
And how would you characterize, like if you were explaining to someone what that physician practice looks like in terms of size, in terms of number of facilities or however you describe it, how would you describe what the physician practice organization looks like?
Heavily peds, so it's heavy in peds, heavy in medicine, heavy in surgery. Subspecialties are probably about 20% of the overall. Operating at, 5 different tax ID hospitals that I know of, and with dozens and dozens of clinics throughout Louisville and Southern Indiana, Kentucky and Southern Indiana.
And everything you're doing is all outpatient rather than inpatient, correct?
Yes, except for some of the surgeries, right? But even then, we're still just focused on the professional fee element of that. Yeah. So no DRGs, no facility billing, no 340B. That's. I mean, I'd like to. So I come from Deloitte, right? I mean, we used to consult on all this stuff, and I've written, Deloitte quality deliverables for a couple of the executives that I was working with here before they got canned, and I had no idea. And it was early on, right? I mean, I joined this outfit about 9 months ago, and I was just getting overly frustrated in the fact that, my work wasn't going anywhere. And then, a quarter later, they announced the sale of this thing, and so, it started coming together for me, and my boss was pretty good at helping me not to feel frustrated. Because here I am telling people to do things. They make sense. They're right. I'm right about this stuff, and it's crazy. I'm telling them how to save $1 million or $2 million here and there, and they're losing $1 million a week. It's all perspective. And so anyhow, that was a little bit of a learning curve, but yeah, no, everything that I'm working on right now is on the pro side and procedure side in an outpatient setting.
Okay, that's good context. Well, look, I'm gonna get Jen to send you over all the think tanks, the panels, the general sessions, and she'll have two options for you. One will be to pick the sessions you want to go to. The second will be to prioritize them. Net, you'll have 90 to 95% of what you pick prioritize will land on your itinerary. Nothing that you didn't pick will land there, which means almost invariably, unless you pick everything, you're going to have a bunch of gaps in your itinerary to actually get some work done when you're there, which is one of the things that folks like about this. It doesn't become that either-or thing of work or be with us, right? You can do both.
Yeah. That sounds
great. Only thing I'm going to do now is I'm going to go to a meeting. I am going to need another call, if that's all right.
Okay.
And we normally do that.
Yeah.
We'll set that up at the end. Now, the context of any meeting, as I said, is any meeting we set is going to be with a senior person on this other side. Sometimes it's the CEO. So you've got a strategic rather than sort of tactical or sales perspective even. None of the meetings that we set will coincide with the other sessions. So as we set a meeting, it's not a choice between a meeting and a think tank. It's actually all carved and set apart anyway.
Okay.
As we go through this, if I am missing the mark, and many of the vendors are very much sort of acute ambulatory care hospital-centric. So if I'm giving you something that for whatever reason doesn't fit the pure sort of definition of a physician practice and or doesn't that match up with a need or a gap or a goal as given to you by ECG, then for God's sake, don't let me tell you the whole synopsis. Just have me cut me short and I'll walk away. I don't want to waste your time. Equally, if I'm giving you something that's strong from an educational, intellectual curiosity perspective, you'd love to learn about it, let me know that. Now, this is where I'm probably going to surprise you, because it's the CEO on the other side who, like you, is capped out in the number of meetings they're allowed to take, 19 times out of 20, if I give them a meeting and I say, he's the right guy, right organization, he'd love to learn about it, blah, 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 19 times out of 20, they're going to go, thank you, but no thank you, which always blows the socks off people. So at the end of the day, you don't want to take a meeting for the sake of it, just for an educational perspective. And it's nothing to say that any of these meetings are certain, but if it matches up against the need, a gap, a goal, a mandate, whatever it may be, then it's worthwhile taking. Okay?
Okay. Yeah, that sounds good.
So I'm just going to start jumping in. So first one, VestaCare helps you recover outstanding patient revenue losses by 35% on average. Without impacting patient satisfaction. Most revenue cycle vendors seek to improve collection of patient balances after all insurance billing has been completed, the easy out point or day zero. They secure the PFR up front while the patients are still registered at the hospital, leading to capture rates between 40 and 70%. Their web-based auto-pay plan keeps you appraised of each individual balance in real time, give patients the ability to access and manage all their outstanding bills in consolidated online location, establishes clear payment plan timetables and flexibility, removes the burden of management from your internal admin folks, lets you know by the day, the week, the month exactly what you're owed by whom and whether or not it's been paid. The compassionate active outreach ensures they understand how to access and pay their bills online. Historical success rate for patients on the plan is over 90%. It can be trialed in a single department to get a feel for them, and they enter engagements at risk. So this is looking to reduce bad debt, improve collections and revenue, dissatisfied with the capabilities of the current revenue cycle provider, and basically collect money up front.
Yeah. No, that sounds good. I would just want to know what their if the percentages hold on the professional side as well, or if their focus is more on the facility side. But it's desperately needed and sorely needed. I mean, I can't. My people don't know what the balances are on the patient accounts when they come down and check in. I mean, it's insane. So that and so because we don't know, we can't. I mean, what good is it to ask? I mean, we collect the copays, but that's it. We don't ask. Hey, it looks like you have this is your outstanding balance. Just kind of turn the screen, let them see it, and then ask them. Yeah. So in short, yeah, I think that would be valuable.
So there's nothing. So you're not even trying to collect or secure the patient's total balance for all obligations up front through
Can you believe
payment?
that?
Do you do financing plans at least at the beginning?
No, ULP is the worst I've ever seen, and I saw some pretty bad places when I was at Deloitte.
Huh. And you have a significant amount of bad debt already, right?
Oh yeah.
How effectively and efficiently are you estimating and adjusting patient bills and collections based on changes in insurance or payment status afterwards?
I don't have much confidence in that. There's actually a vendor out here called Altruist that I've been working with to help Debbie sort through those things, right, and try to get her to pull the trigger on a RetroPay solution, right? I mean, this is an outfit that has an algorithm that scrapes the Medicaid rolls for the state of Kentucky and the state of Indiana and alerts the source system, right, which for us is GE Centricity, for whenever a patient who is true self-pay becomes Medicaid eligible. Oh. So at that point, they go back and they RetroPay. They update the record in Centricity, so the errors from that point forward go away. But it's baffling to me that it's as bad as it is.
How many of these problems you're having from physician practice is the hospital having similar problems?
I would venture that they're fairly common themes, very common problems.
But you guys are different enough that if you guys find a solution for any one of these problems, they're not going to then look at that and think, oh, maybe we should adopt this as well, or is there some element of that? Do you look at what each other are doing for best practices at all, I guess is where I'm going.
There hasn't been that view historically. However, when Kentucky won decided to forego operations of a few of the facilities, James Brown Cancer Institute and the University of Louisville Hospital. They decided that they weren't going to operate them as of July 1st of this year, and so University Medical Group, which is a separate entity, took over operating those facilities. Well, University Medical Group and the University of Louisville Physicians Group is far more collaborative than I've seen in the past. So it appears that there's definitely interest in looking at best practices there from a facility perspective and from a drug billing perspective and maybe even a rev cycle perspective. I'm not sure what the long-term strategic play is, but they're already starting to share resources. They're sharing, shared resources, similar things, right? So, certain IT resources, HR, functions like that. So I don't see it an unrealistic scenario where the practice plan, the physician group adopts something, and then the hospital readily adopts it as well.
Okay.
At least at the University of Louisville Hospital. I can only say that because I don't know who the buyer is for Jewish and for Frazier.
Okay. Try this one. It's a firm called State Collection. They provide bad debt collections, early out recovery, or insurance follow-up services backed by superior technology, guided by speech analytics. They use reactive scripting and fly-out messages to resolve patient balances on the first call every time. The system instantly pre-approves eligible payments for a payment plan, and the caller's script immediately segues them into account setup. First call resolution rates are 23% higher than competitors. Recovery rates are dramatically higher within the first 6 months. There's no way to trial their services. They don't mind being utilized in conjunction with a competitor as a means of showing off their capabilities. So these guys are all about revenue collection, bad debt recovery, as well as insurance follow-up, looking for early out bad debt solutions that won't impact patient satisfaction.
So the insurance follow-up that they do, that's after the claim has been dropped and denied, or is that just eligibility verification?
Not sure, to be honest.
Okay. That would be my only follow-up question there.
Which element of that would you be more interested in?
Whichever one does more.
Okay.
I mean, it sounds like the first two are very, very similar. Whichever one has more bandwidth, right? Whichever one has expertise
I think the big difference between them is VestaCare are all about setting up the patient payment plans realistically at the front, getting your people in the mode of actually asking for and setting this up as people walk in and are standing at the registration. These guys are more about, once that's already happened, chasing up the money afterwards.
Yeah. I mean, it all needs work, right? I mean, to be fair, I don't think with GE Centricity configured the way that it is, I don't know that we would be able to go with the first vendor because I don't think we're able to tell them what the payment, what the total cost of care is going to be from a practice perspective right now. I mean, we can tell them ballpark based on what the CMS reimbursement is for an outpatient follow-up or an outpatient new visit, but for procedures and all of that, I mean, I don't know.
They don't actually.
One
of the things we have with all vendors, right, is we find out what EMRs they can work with and not work with. So what I've got for you guys is everything that everyone that says they can't work with GE Centricity, I've just eliminated already.
Perfect.
So if they haven't told me that, that's not to say that we haven't missed it, but would tell me, because that's our first screen when we go through all this stuff, right? If they can't work with your EMR, then nothing can happen.
That's right. That's exactly right. Yeah.
In terms of how do you do your bad debt collection right now? Who does that? How do you do that? Do you do it yourselves? Have you got outside firms doing it for you?
They've got outside vendors, I think. They've got a local group, and but they do have I think they have an in-house person too for some reason. I don't know why they haven't just outsourced all of it.
Okay. And how are the external vendors? How are they performing?
I don't know. I don't know. I'm not privy to that right now. I can figure it out though.
Yep. One of the things I'd say, and we'll send you a note on this, is set against any meeting that we set. The
Mm-hmm.
three things you want to know going into any meeting. One is, because you've got a limited number of time in the meeting, so we make sure that they don't say to you, you know the question I asked you, tell me about your organization, tell me about your role and responsibility, what does your organization look like? No one's going to ask you that because we can write that down because you don't want to waste 10 minutes explaining it to each person. Equally, you want to go into each meeting knowing three things. First one is, on a basic level, what is it that they do? Okay, so you don't want to ask anyone, what do you do? Because that would be crazy. Number two is set against what they do, you want to know what is your potential gap and opportunity. So if they said, okay, you know that we do collections, what's your opportunity? You want to be able to explain what the deficiency is or what the goal is. And third, and this is more to take anyone seriously, and if you're the CFO or the VP of Rev Cycle, they don't really need to prepare for this because they just know this anyway because that's the scope of their job. But for you, because this is going to be a little bit broader than the scope of your job, you want to know, okay, who is the vendor you have in place now and what's the deficiency? Like what's the problem? So that's probably the one thing is set against each one of these that you might not know. And so they would look at you as if you don't know who your collection firm is and or why your collection firm may be dropping the ball, the logical conclusion they'll come to, and they'll be twofold. One will be, oh, you're not the right guy. And two, well, if you don't know what's wrong with the existing vendor, why are you speaking to me? Because I would either be complimenting them some of the time or replacing them some of the time. But if you don't know what's wrong with your existing vendor, then why on earth would you do either? And from their perspective, it would be and so what will happen is that happens, and we watch this all the time, and it doesn't really happen with the CFOs or the AVPs of RevCycle because they just know this stuff without having to prepare. But when it happens to other folks who aren't quite the job title, you just watch the vendors and they just shut down. They stop telling you anything. It just becomes you basically then just get the brochure, right? Because they just go, you know what, this isn't real. Because if you don't know who the vendor is or what the problem with the vendor is, then I'm just educating you, and then they just look at it as an education, and then they'll just give you the broadest education, and then realistically, you could have read their website for that same thing. They're not going to tell you anything insightful.
Yeah.
Cool. But I'll get Jen to write that down for you, and and we'll send you the information on each vendor meeting that we do make.
That sounds good.
And so you'd look at this. You'd look at this one and think: is it early out help that I need? Is it bad debt recovery I need? Is it insurance follow-up? What have I got in place right now? What's the deficiency for each right now? Because you've got such a limited time that if you're all over the show and it's very broad and vague, in truth, you're not going to get anywhere in the time you've got for the meeting.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Yeah. What's the percentage of self-pay and self-pay after insurance that you have right now?
Self-pay after insurance is right around the percentage or the dollar amount. I mean, self-pay after insurance is about $4 million out of $100 million in AR.
Yeah. And what percentage of your accounts ultimately make it to bad debt right now? Do you know?
I don't actually.
Okay.
I'm writing all these questions down though. So I've got a meeting with my VP of Rev Cycle tomorrow afternoon. So.
Yeah. This will actually help save them a whole bunch of time. And again, the big thing for them to understand is these will be the non-obvious vendors that aren't already calling you.
Yeah.
Which is the way of looking at that. Okay. So this one is a firm called Intermedics. They've got a revenue integrity analysis solution, combines cutting-edge software analytics, consultative support to target revenue leakage, identify lost or missing charges, recover all retrospective collections on contingency, powerful machine learning and data analytics evaluate even the most complex or extensive revenue cycle data sets such as claims, patient encounters to uncover the root causes of any underperformance and tease out the anomalies in revenue capture across all departments and specialties. They show exactly where your processes, your individual positions are contributing to revenue leakage. It's extremely low overhead and requires no expensive software implementation or redesign.
I mean, I think that's tremendously beneficial because right now we don't have that capability. I was talking to a company called nThrive that has provided that capability via an Epic plugin that was ultimately able to tell us leakage by referring physician by clinic that they worked. And this was in Oregon, right, when I was managing the Cancer Institute, because the whole reason we partnered with Legacy was because they had referring provider base. And so we were trying to determine how much of that base is leaking out to our competition when it's in the legacy health system's best interest to keep everything in the system because it's a joint venture, right? They're getting a cut of the pie, and so why not grow the pie? Yep. And we used nThrive for them, but this vendor sounds like it would be a good fit as well, especially in light of the fact that we have so much in medicine and in family medicine and peds. I mean, it would be good to know how much of that is leaking out to our competitors.
Do you know how much your leakage is right now, and do you know the exact sources of your leakage?
No, that's why I set up a meeting with Debbie, who's our VP of Rev Cycle, and nThrive, is because I wanted to know that, right? I wanted to know how many of our adult population is going to our competition, Norton, for all PM&R, and how much of it is going to the competition, Leatherman Group, private practice surgery groups, whatever. I just wanted to know what it was, and Debbie, naturally Debbie and the CFO are wanting to know that, but they don't have the capability to do that right now.
What's the system or the process you've got in place to identify missed or unbilled charges?
What we do is we take a listing of arrived visits in GE Centricity, and so arrived visits that don't have charges yet. And then we look at it another way, also arrived visits where the physician hasn't closed the note yet. So.
Wow. So it's a very manual process.
Oh, very, very, very manual. Yes, very manual process.
Yeah. So that almost makes it very difficult to actually get a clear picture of the extent of these sort of unbilled losses, or sort of dial in on the exact root causes either.
It does, absolutely it does, because when I look at it, I see a number. Then when I ask for the reason why, they bucket it into these these cube reports that I think we have a vendor, PDS or PDM. I mean, it's very similar to like Clarity or Cognos, but they're just canned things, and it just takes the data and cuts it one way and gives you. I mean, it's nothing actionable. To get to the actionable, I've got to sort through and scrub through, at times, hundreds of rows of data to get to something that I can actually tell a physician, this is why this is an issue, right? And it's it's very cumbersome.
There's a second thing they do that I almost gave it to you first. Same company. They've got a practice management tool that helps manage physician workflow end to end. It goes beyond any standard EMR offering, dives into individual KPIs for each physician, benchmarking them against the standards set by cohort groups around the country. They create incentive structures for employed physicians by taking a snapshot of current performance, implement solutions to identify opportunities for improvement, outsource coding and billing, use the generated revenue as an incentive. Effectively, they create a virtual private group giving physicians partial ownership and tangible reasons to improve workflow and documentation accuracy and accountability, ensure consistent workflows.
That would be huge. Yeah, that would be, that'd be excellent. That'd be excellent for everybody here.
Yeah, and they're currently working with 15,000 providers across all 50 states, influencing more than 15 million patient encounters annually, with 100% of the clients realizing a positive ROI.
Jeez. Yeah, anything like that would just work wonders for the physician. Because right now, they're paid because they've got a belly button and a social security number. that's got to change. The physician comp model's got to change, and
Are
you
your are
know,
your are
because,
your are your physicians employed, or are they independent, or how does it work?
yeah, no, they've got a faculty appointment with the University of Louisville School of Medicine,
Hmm.
and they've got a dual appointment as a clinician with the University of Louisville Physicians Group. But all of the most of the compensation, I mean, they are employed, right? I mean, they're not part of any sort of specialty, independent group that's contracted by ULP to provide services. So yeah, they get a handsome paycheck for regardless of what they do, and that's got to stop. I mean, we're trying to we're changing that in my department. But I mean, it's just unsustainable. And if I'm only taking up 5% of the total operating expense for the whole health science campus, or 10% or whatever it is, I can only do so much. I need to be able to do more and being able to provide this to the dean and to the officers at ULP. I mean, I think that it's certainly something to consider. And if a doctor can be sold on it by saying, look, I'm going to be more productive, and I'll be able to be told what I need to do, and if it makes my life easier, then yes, I'll do it, right?
So what, and right now, what sort of exists in place for physician performance reviews? Like how are those reviews right now tied to compensation and incentives?
So it varies by division. So, and it's going to vary by department. I mean, some, in the neurosurgery department, we pay at the median of AAMC, and we budget at the 75th percentile, so we can bonus up to that depending upon productivity, academic activity, research and education, and and teaching, right? Because we have residents and such, and so there's four real pillars that have been defined by the university that we need to make sure that we're hitting, and so that's the approach that the chair takes, right? That my boss takes, is that he sits down with each of the faculty and goes through all of this, but it's all, I mean, it's the only objective measures are work RVUs and publications, right? I mean, you can tell how many work RVUs, you can tell how many collections, or what's coming in by way of collections, and you do a medical journal publication search for book chapters and medication, and the rest is not very quantitative. And I would love it if their paychecks every month were a function of their activity that month. I would love it if it would just all automate like that.
Yeah. Does this area fall under your remit or responsibilities at this time in terms of, Mark, this is A, your responsibility, and B, someone said this is a deficiency within the organization that we need to find a solution to?
That would be my call in my department. But I know it's pervasive throughout the entire School of Medicine.
Yeah. And in terms of the School of Medicine, the School of Medicine would then come back to the hospital itself, correct? So in terms of...
Good question. Actually, it's that way at most campuses across the country, but that's not necessarily the case here. It should be that way, but unfortunately, it's not that way right now.
So this one wouldn't be one for the physician practice. This one would be one for the School of Medicine.
It would still be for the physician practice, because ultimately the School of Medicine, the dean is responsible to ensure that the clinicians, can practice and be employed through the school. It's a really funny dynamic between the CEO of ULP and the dean. The dean has a tremendous amount of power, but the CEO of the University of Louisville Physicians Group is kind of the person on the hook for the decisions that ULP makes. The dean can influence some of those decisions, but she's a very weak dean. She's not a strong dean, which is difficult in this kind of an environment, right? I mean, even people who know her really good and are who are friends with her on a personal level say, she's a wonderful lady, not a strong dean. And but I mean, I think that the sell on this one is to the executive directors and administration and the VP of operations to say, look, you want to fix the front end of the revenue cycle and make the docks more efficient. I mean, one of the core things that they want to do, one of the core goals at ULP is to improve utilization and increase arrival rate, patient arrival. I mean, this product, if configured appropriately and working the way that it's designed, would be able to give us complete and accurate and timely reporting on both of those elements.
Okay. Okay. Let's have a look. When would be a good time to actually finish this up with you? Are you available?